This is Corinne.
And this is Ayani.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
Welcome to the second half of our discussion on the Hulu dramedy Dying for Sex.
In this episode, we get into the details about Molly's sexual escapades, as well as the other important relationships that balance out her life, especially with her friend and caretaker, Nikki.
As a bit of a content warning, Dying for Sex deals with terminal illness and trauma related to sexual assault. Because these themes are so woven into the show, we won't be able to provide specific time codes for when they come up in our discussion, but we wanted to make sure you knew going in.
If you also have big feelings about Dying for Sex, let us know on Instagram, Blue Sky, or Tumblr at SexLoveLitPodcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to and rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. And, as a favor, maybe share an episode with a friend or two.
All right, let's dive in. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sex, Love, Literature.
Woo.
We are excited to keep talking about Dying for Sex on Hulu. The show is on Hulu. We're not Dying for Sex on Hulu. That would be something else.
Whole nother conversation entirely.
Yeah. Which I'm sure is like what they were going for when they called it that. I mean, from the podcast name, I guess, and then like they've maintained that on Hulu. It's a very interesting name, and gets into the comedy and tragedy of it all. But anyway, before we dive right back into our spoiler-filled discussion, if you would like more context on the show and our sort of initial spoiler-free reactions, go back, listen to part 1. And also, if you want to hear more about how Steve sucks, we already talked about that.
Yep.
It might come up again.
It probably
will.
But
he does suck. But yeah, all that's in part 1. But before we get into talking about Dying for Sex in more detail, again with I'm not even sure if that's a sex pun. That's just like a sentence.
It is. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, before that, we will get into our favorite segment, our favorite repeating segment, What's Sparking Joy? Ayani, what is What's Sparking Joy?
Oh, shit.
Do you know the tagline?
What's Sparking Joy is when we take a moment to talk about a piece of media, be it television, movies, music, etc., that is currently sparking joy for us.
Nicely done. I thought that was like probably 10 seconds longer than when I do it, but like,
that doesn't surprise
you
me.
got the gist.
But this also means that you have to go first because, by the way, this is a lightning round of What's Sparking Joy since this is a part 2 episode. Corinne, what is very quickly sparking joy for you? Usually we do songs, so let's do a song.
So for our lightning round of What's Sparking Joy, we're looking at what's at the top of our on repeat on Spotify. And for me, that is the song Twin by Jennie from Blackpink. All of the Blackpink artists have been releasing solo content, I assume in preparation for their upcoming tour, which may or may not be their last as a group, but anyway, but which also we got tickets to.
We did. I was going to say, you left out an important part there. It may be their last as a group, but we're going to go see it. And
we're going to go. It's going to be great.
We got to get outfits.
But I've been enjoying all their solo content for the most part. But the one that is at the top of my list, because I am a depressing person, is Twin by Jennie. And it's very sad, but I really like it. It has like a lot of like acoustic guitar sounding stuff going on, and it's like a very pretty but maudlin piece.
So conversely, at the top of my list is also a song by Jennie, but it is the opening track, not the interlude that opens it, called Like Jennie, which is not sad at all, but is kind of like
it's a bop.
It is. It's like a hype anthem. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I fucks with this. So apparently I fucks with it a lot because it is the song that I have the most on repeat right now. And I was like, oh, look at Corinne and I on like the same but different wavelengths here.
Yep.
And I will say just a quick shout out to the second song that is on my currently in repeat, Saving Flowers by Salute featuring Rina Sawayama, because I like did a full like jumping around dance thing to it in my kitchen the other day, and my knees didn't hurt. So that means my PT is working. So I was very excited about that. So shout out to Saving Flowers as well.
And to being middle-aged, I guess.
I mean, I guess technically I'm middle-aged, but you don't have to say it like that.
I mean, once you pass 30, your knees start giving out on you. So
yeah, I don't think
we're both in that territory.
I was gonna say I don't have to claim middle-aged until I'm like deep in my 40s, right? Because I'm not even 40 yet.
Line is.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm calling it for me, and this has been What's Sparking Joy.
Jennie is what's sparking joy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, who want to rock with Jennie? Us, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so diving right back in to Dying for Sex. We talked a bit about how we think the show works. We talked a bit about why Steve sucks, which we just couldn't wait to do. We couldn't wait. But one of the things that is of most importance in this show is Molly's sexual exploration. And I don't know why you would listen to a show called Sex, Love, Literature and not expect us to talk about the sex stuff, right? It's literally in the opening. So now we're going to do what we promised to do, and we're going to talk a bit about the sex stuff, which, LOL, the first bullet in our outline is Steve sucks. I didn't realize you did that.
He does. That's sort of like a big part of like why Molly needs to go elsewhere. So the reason the show is called Dying for Sex, well, A, is because Molly is dying, but also B, because she has never had an orgasm with another person.
Yeah, ever.
And she decides that is something that she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this show is about her figuring out what she likes, because she's kind of never known and never had like the opportunity to like explore that, just because, like, in part because of her past with sexual abuse, which we talked about a little bit in the first part, but also just because like her she's again been married to this man for 10 years and never had an orgasm with him.
Molly is, I would say they're in their 30s, right? They're deep into their 30s, still young to be dying from cancer, right? But you know, she's not a teenager, right? This is a grown woman. But something I did want to mention, actually, that I can't believe I didn't think of before, the show actually opens with a sexy memory of Molly's, right?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so while the first, like, action of the story in time is Molly and Steve at the couples therapist, Molly is imagining or daydreaming about this time in college when a guy went down on her, and she was the closest she had ever been to having an orgasm with somebody else. And it was interrupted because it was college, and I think somebody came in the room, right? Mm-hmm. But that kind of sets the scene for the rest of the show, that there is going to be this kind of focus on Molly's sexual pleasure, but also that she really hasn't had sexual pleasure since she was a teenager. So she has to kind of figure out what that means for her as an adult woman who's been with a man for 10 years who does not care for her sexually, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I keep looking at Steve Sucks and I'm just like, yeah, that's correct. So one of the things that makes Molly's sexual journey so interesting, beyond the fact that, I mean, personally speaking, I appreciate a story that focuses on older women. And I say older, I don't necessarily mean like 80-year-old women, right? But women who are not 20, who are exploring things for themselves sexually. I appreciate narratives about that, because sex is a lifelong journey. And even if you have a healthy sex life, what you do is going to change over the course of your living. So a lot of Molly's story is about discovery and her kind of like journey into different kinds of kink and kink communities. We talked a little bit about her friend Puppy, who likes to dress up like a dog. But yeah, I know I have some thoughts about this journey, and I think talking about Sonia a bit here too will also be interesting. But did you have any initial like thoughts about Molly's sexual adventures?
So I really appreciated the way that this was structured. Because it starts out by thinking, like we really cover a lot of different angles on where people, oh God.
I told you. They're going to be there. It's not even going to be our fault.
There's a lot of different perspectives on like where people can get pleasure and like where people's sex lives might be located, because like we start out even with her just like getting a vibrator and taking care of herself. She propositions a man in the elevator at the hotel she's at,
he was really
and then
hot.
she ends up, that would have been probably a good time, but she also like wasn't quite ready yet.
Yes.
But anyway, so the thing that is that ties a lot of these together is that she kind of lets go of being worried about being embarrassed and becomes more willing to try things and to go outside of her comfort zone and to sort of move outside of the sort of heteronormative vanilla expectation of sex. I'm putting that in quotation marks because like however works for you, no judgment here. But she does sort of explore more and is less worried about being embarrassed in doing that exploration, which in many ways is kind of liberating.
Sorry, I just started cackling because you made me think of that episode. So first I had an academic thought and then I had a silly thought. So I'll do the silly thought first. But one of the things that is so hilarious and traumatizing about that sequence when she just gets the vibrator and handles herself is apparently some hacker, because she's going around on all these different weird sex sites, and I say weird because they are not like vetted sex sites, not the what you look at is weird,
like, unsafe, like from a digital technology standpoint.
And they get a video of her wanking, and they're going to release it if she does not pay a ransom, which I will say Steve pays. Which, again, is nice of him. However, he then says that her face orgasming is disgusting. So, you know, people have layers. But that's
anyone who shames you for, like, your pleasure can fuck off, man.
Yeah, especially, like, you know, your husband. But, A.
Oh, boy. He sucked.
He sucks. But, A, deeply hilarious how it was handled. But B, extra hilarious because, you know, they send emails like that all the fucking time, and it's usually the same, like, it's like, we caught you doing this thing, we'll release it to the masses. It's never real, right? It's just spam. But the fact that this actually happened to her, I was like, this is why you gotta vet your porn site small. You can't just be out there, or
at least like put a post-it note over your webcam,
or like get a VPN. Like, there are things to do to be safe. Your digital sexual health also matters. But the academic thought I had is, I'm wondering about this through line, and I'm going to say this, but like put a pin in it for another time. When we talk about stories of women's sexual pleasure, and the first step is like going and getting the vibrator, I'm curious about how those scenes either mirror each other, how they speak to each other, because we mentioned Fanta G Spot, also known as Hit the Spot, in our last episode when we were saying don't watch Dying for Sex.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a Korean drama that we've talked about, available on Viki. Highly recommend, not for the living room.
Right,
go on.
Exactly. And there's a sequence where the main character in that goes and buys a whole bunch of vibrators because she has also never had an orgasm ever in life.
In her 30s again.
Yeah. By herself or with another person. No orgasms. Also, I think us talking about that episode is what got us kind of like restricted on Instagram, but that's neither here nor there. Anyhow, so I'm thinking about these sequences of women who have not had orgasms going to get vibrators and then doing that sort of exploration of their own bodies, right? Before bringing other people into the equation, and how that both kind of speaks to real life, right? And some texts that I have read about people knowing what actually pleasures them before being able to communicate it to other people. But I'm just thinking about the filmic representations of that, the video representations of that, and just maybe how scenes like that speak to each other and how they're depicted, right? Because Mina was her name, right? Or was that the redhead one?
Mina was the redhead, I think.
Hije
and Mina.
Good job, Ayani. But Hije, while she was not hacked by hackers, she did drop all of her like dildos and stuff in the street in front of the guy that she was interested in. So there's also this pairing of like sexual self-exploration with comedy and embarrassment of visibility, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's like they're addressing the potential for shame in being able to take care of like your own pleasure, but then turning it into comedy. So they're like, look, this could be embarrassing. And it is embarrassing, but like we're laughing with you, not at you almost.
And it's not the self-pleasure that's embarrassing, right?
That's more like getting caught.
Right, or being perceived when you are not ready to be perceived, which I think is a through line in Dying for Sex and for Hit the Spot, which I honestly was not drawing connections between until we started talking about. So this is something I might have to mentally come back to. But the reason we were going down this road is thinking a bit about Molly's movement towards different, I don't want to say kink communities, right? But different elements of kink and BDSM that previously she had never played with or experienced. But this idea of control is something that becomes really interesting and sexy for her. So there are a lot of ways I think we can take this conversation, right? I'm thinking a lot about too the blending of like sex and horror. No, it's not horror. Whoops, that's my normal research. Sex and comedy and tragedy, right? And I know there's an episode in particular that I'm thinking about, but is there a place you'd like to start?
I think maybe just I kind of want to acknowledge here a little bit of the way that the show offers a little bit of a fantasy about like what someone in this situation would actually find if they're like looking like it's a boy next door fantasy, like adapted for this context, but like that the person who it eventually ends up working out with is like her neighbor, who ends up being like a very nice man who also is into kink in the same ways that she is in like a compatible way, but also that like she meets all these like nice men for the most part that she like can sort of try out these like sexual experiences with, like this and nothing really ever goes, with the exception of like the New Year's Eve asshole. Yeah. Even he never like assaulted her.
Though I was worried about that, I will say.
Yeah. But like it never went sideways in that direction.
Right.
I think this is like, this is a little bit of a fantasy, but I will also say that like, you know, if I never have a problem with people having like a fantasy presented to them in media generally, but particularly in this case, like I'm fine with this being a fantasy for like someone in this situation, but I do think it is important to acknowledge the ways in which that is working.
Yeah, and I'd be curious in what ways her exploration has been embellished for the fictional version of this story, right? To do like a comparison to the podcast. But yeah, I think that makes me want to think a little bit about like her guardian sexual angels here in Sonia, her palliative care social worker, and then one of Sonia's partners, I believe their name was G.
Yeah.
So Sonia in the first episode tells Molly or shows Molly that they have like a bit of leather that they wear around their necks or their neck singular. They're not an alien. They don't have two necks. That
again, that's a different part of your research.
Different part of my research. Goodness, it's all bleeding together. But that they like the feel of leather close to their skin to kind of remind them of other times. And that kind of opens the door to Molly being able to have kink conversations with Sonia, and also Sonia taking on a more expanded role beyond just a palliative care social worker in bringing Molly to this not self-help group therapy.
Kink party?
No, the group therapy.
Not the kink party.
We're
getting
to the kink
group
party.
Therapy.
Yes.
Sorry.
The cancer group
I jumped
therapy.
ahead.
You did a little bit. In which Molly is talking a bit about her desire to have an orgasm, right? In a larger group, bringing it just from talks with Sonia about this being on her bucket list to a larger conversation with other people, and then kind of following an expansion of having the conversation, kind of like what you were pointing to with getting rid of layers of embarrassment, right? So she's able to talk about wanting an orgasm with Sonia. Then Sonia brings her to this self-help group, to this therapy circle. She can say it there. And then, and this and a little bit feels like overstepping the bounds of being a social worker. However, I support it for the fantasy of
fantasy.
it all.
Yeah.
Sonia brings Molly and Nikki to a sex party potluck, which they bring lasagna to, I think. And it's one of Sonia's previous partners, G, who is running the party. And this is the first time that Molly really gets to experience kind of like being within the kink community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's almost a sense that it didn't even occur to her that this was something she could want. Like she hadn't even thought about this as like a possibility.
Yeah. And this party opened up a lot of possibilities for her. And just a quick aside, since you gave a little something at your expense in the first episode. So I'm watching the sex party scene. I don't remember if I watched this in the living room or not. And I'm listening to the song. And the song they're playing at a sex party is a song that I had added to like my dance playlist maybe a week ago. And I don't know what that says about me, but you know, it is what it is. But in that party, Molly kind of makes the connection between control and her sexual desire. And the next, is it the same episode? It might be the same episode. She wants to start experimenting with being kind of like, they don't really use dom and submissive in terms like that, which I think is on purpose, but she wants to try experimenting with being in a more dominant role, right? And kind of has to come to understand that she has to also understand that more submissive side of her as well in order to be safe and careful as someone who takes on a more dominant role. Yeah. So do we want to come back to Sonia more when we talk about care, or do you want to talk a little bit about how Sonia and G function in thinking about like Molly's sexual awakening?
We definitely need to come back to Sonia because they play a role, I think, both in Molly trying to explore like the sexual part of her life, but also in the other aspects of Molly's care.
Yeah.
But I do think thinking about Sonia and then especially G is almost sort of guides that open the door for Molly to figure out this part of her life is really interesting.
Yeah, because G at the party does this kind of like, I don't know, bondage display maybe, where they have this person tied up on a table and they're like touching them lightly and are like, you can't come until I say you can come. And again, breaking down those barriers of embarrassment, because Molly and a whole bunch of people now are standing watching this. So it's something that becomes private public in that it's not on the streets of New York, but it is in front of the eyes of many, kind of creates another level of acceptability for Molly, we can say. But then from that, she kind of like runs off and goes to try to like find a man to, you know, be like, I'm in control. And she has a little bit, I think that's the first time that the abusive ex of her mother appears as kind of that ghostly haunting figure. And because of that episode, she then goes back to, she finds G at their job at like what, a Williams and Sonoma or something. Right?
Yeah, like a home good, a bougie home goods store.
Yeah. Which like those towels looked really soft. So like, you know, but then they have Molly agrees to submit to G. Oh, she talks to G first before she meets up with the man, doesn't like what she hears from G, and then now comes back to submit to G. And then they do like, I'm making more connections now about what you said about these layers of embarrassment, right? Because Molly then has a very safe kind of bondage session with G in which G is in control and works it kind of through Molly, but also lets Molly know that she's also in control of the situation, which I think
she can stop it at any time.
Right, which I think is an important give and take. And I think that scene was really important to thinking about Molly's like relationship, not only to sexuality, but there was, and I feel like I'm rambling, so please feel free to cut in here, but like it was also mirrored to how that episode opened when Molly was strapped to a table to get certain kind of x-rays done, and her face was covered and her arms were held down, and it was very much against her will, outside of her control. She didn't know what was happening and like kind of had a panic attack, right?
So I think something that is really interesting that is happening here in relation to Molly's sort of sexual journey and what she's figuring out, how she's figuring out what she likes, is that she also sort of uses that to figure out how to regain some control in her cancer treatment, because a lot of it is and has been things that are just happening to her. And to some degree with the cancer, that is inescapable. Like, it is just happening to her. But she sort of uses that moment in learning more about what she wants from sex and from sexual relationships to think about, well, like, what do I need from my relationship with my doctor? Like, I need him to treat me like a person. I need him to answer my questions. Like, this is what I need to feel some semblance of control of something that is otherwise uncontrollable. So those two storylines, that are those two aspects of her life, I should say, then sort of intersect in that way, and in her figuring out how to control what she can, but also be able to let go of what she can't.
Yeah. And I think also in that moment when she kind of stops Dr. P and or Jerry, as we learn his first name is, and you know, gets his first name and is like, come sit with me, kind of using some of this newfound sense of control, and communicates to him that she needs to know exactly what's going to happen to her during all of these procedures, is when he also starts to make a turn, I think, as a character. But go ahead.
And I think so much of that as well is that, like, when Steve was taking care of Molly the first time she had cancer, everything was mediated through Steve.
Yeah.
In a way that, like, Nikki, as Molly's sort of primary caretaker here, learns to, like, get a better handle on the information and the bills and the sort of logistics, but is not, like, in charge in the same way that I think Steve was. So Molly, in this sense, is the one in charge, and she is figuring out how to do that, and how to regain that, almost like something that she didn't have before.
Right. Yeah, because I almost, in the sequence where we do see Steve kind of like sliding in early on in the show to like talk to the doctor and leave her out, it almost doesn't feel like she abdicated that on purpose, but more that he took that from her, and now she's kind of relegated to the backseat. Another reason why Steve sucks.
Well, and like, again, it is complicated because, like, I kind of want to point out here that, like, okay, so a lot of the time when women, particularly later in life, do have cancer and have a male partner, they leave. They don't stay and take care of them. I think, like, a statistic that I heard was, like, they're, like, 6 times more likely to leave or something. So, like, Steve at least did stay and did want to stay. So this isn't that story. And there is also a degree to which, like, especially as Molly, like, gets chemo and then gets chemo brain and, like, can't form words, and, like, her fingers might get numb, so maybe she can't open the door. There is a degree to which, like, care is necessary. And there are times at which she can't make decisions for herself. And, like, Nikki needs to step in, but it doesn't have to be every decision.
Right. And it's not talking about her like she's not in the room.
So before we get too much more into the sort of, like, Molly's various, like, caretaking type relationships, I think it is important here to turn our attention back to, in thinking about Molly's sex life, her relationship with Neighbor Guy, again, played by Rob Delaney. He doesn't have a name besides Neighbor Guy.
No. So I watched it with subtitles, and all that comes up is Neighbor Guy. And I think he's credited as Neighbor Guy, which is such an interesting move to not name him, but have him be such an important part of her end of life. Yeah. So no, he's just Neighbor Guy.
So what did you think of Neighbor Guy and the sort of arc of her relationship with him? Also, tell us a little bit more about the arc of her relationship with him.
Yeah, sure. So Neighbor Guy, it's really interesting. She starts off hating this man. And I will say this is not a man who lived across from her when she lived with her husband. But after she moves out of the apartment with Steve, she gets her own little like rinky-dink place in some kind of little rinky-dink apartment building. And Neighbor Guy lives across from her. And at first she can't stand him. He's kind of messy. He leaves stuff around. He eats tacos in the elevator. And she's like, that's fucking disgusting. But also probably I was thinking this because of all the stuff she's going through. Her senses are probably all out of whack too.
Oh, yeah. She's probably especially sensitive to smell.
Yeah. So they kind of have a antagonistic relationship. However, secretly he likes someone to take control of him. So when she's like, hey, pick up your fucking trash, and he picks it up, and she's like, oh. So they have this sequence where she starts like giving him commands and he's following them. And it's like this first little foray into the kind of relationship that she wants to have. And I'm not going to go through everything, right? Ultimately, what ends up happening is they like push and pull at each other a bit. He ends up becoming really important to her. They tell each other that they love each other towards the end. He is the one that ultimately helps Molly have an orgasm with another person, right? But they have all these moments where they come together and then something pulls them apart. The first one, which is kind of hilarious. Yeah. She's in his apartment and they're doing their thing and she's going around his apartment saying mean things, thinks that Bill de Blasio is his father. And then he's like, kick me in the dick. And she's like, sure, okay. Not right away. Like she ramps up to it and she kicks him. But then because the cancer is in her bones, in her hip, she like fractures her hip and goes down. So, which is terrible, but also is kind of the way they shoot it is hilarious in the moment because she is kicking this man in the dick. But they have moments like that kind of throughout the show. And the show is only 8 episodes. So it's interesting how many like touch points.
8 like 20 to 30 minute episodes. Yeah. They're not long.
No,
either.
They're not long. So it's kind of amazing how many touch points they have where they're like running in parallel and then they come apart. And something that I was actually thinking about, Neighbor Guy does not come to see her in hospice.
Oh yeah, she doesn't, and she doesn't want him to.
Yeah. So they have a sequence where she is in the hospital before she has a spinal tap, where he comes to her private hospital room. I will say it was very large. And they kind of have a night together, right? And that's when she is able to have her first orgasm with another person. But I think that is the last time they see each other, right? And she says there's this exchange between them that I'm not going to be able to quote correctly, but that like made me burst out into tears. Because another refrain that they have is like she'll say something to him, right? And he'll say no. And that's kind of the end all be all. Not so much that she's like, you should take me out to dinner. And he says no, but more she'll try to push him away and he'll deny that drawing of distance. And when they're in bed, in the hospital bed together, she says something like, I'll just be a blip to you. Like, you can move on with your life and forget me. And he just says, no. And that kind of like destroyed me. I was weeping because, you know, for her, she's moving towards death, right? This is a big thing for her to cross off her bucket list, but like she knows the end is coming. And she, as we'll come back to with Nikki, she doesn't want to severely negatively impact the people in her life with her death. So I think this is one of those moments where she's trying to push him away and he refuses. He is kind of like, I'll hold on to you in my memories for, forever. So I don't know. I'm going to stop. Neighbor Guy was a lot. I liked him though.
So perhaps to add to that,
please.
I think he's really interesting as a character because like the Rob Delaney of it all meant that even when he was kind of a slob, it was kind of like, oh, he's still hot though.
Yeah.
Like, there's only so much you can do to, like, make Rob Delaney less attractive looking. Like, we know where this is going. Uh-huh. But one of the things I found really fascinating about his characterization is he starts out as, like, this sort of gross, weird slob who, like, can hear her masturbate through the wall.
Oh,
and then
I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Girl, as someone currently living in an apartment with walls that are just a little bit too thin, I have some empathy for that situation. Uh-huh. Not to that degree, but like, oh man, apartment living is a situation.
Yeah.
But they start out sort of as like impersonal kink partners to a degree, but then sort of almost against Molly's, not against her will, but like maybe against what her inclination was.
Yeah, I think
to learn more about each other. And like, she finds out that like, oh, like he's divorced and like his wife was cheating on him and then wanted to have an open relationship, and that like this is like his first time feeling like connected to someone else really since that happened. And like, you, as you learn more about him and what brought him to where he is, there is a little bit more of an emotional connection there that adds more depth to it than just that she was using him for sex.
Right.
But there is also this, it's almost a joke really, when after he has like, after like their last night together, at the end of it, when he says like, oh, like, so you were just using me for sex. And she's like, yeah. But the reason that it is sort of a poignant joke moment is that there also like was legitimate like love and affection there. And like, I think the first moment where I really sort of was like, oh, like this is like a good dude is when after they've had, I don't know, a session, or I don't know what you call it. I'm maybe like revealing how vanilla I am here.
I appreciated your use of experience. That was good.
But he like says, he basically checks in and is like, hey, like, are you like getting something out of this? Because like, I know I am, but like, I want to make sure that like you are too. And that, okay, maybe part of why this was so poignant to me is that like, that is like the opposite of Steve.
Yes.
And that like, this neighbor guy whose name she doesn't even know wants to make sure that she is getting what she wants out of their relationship because he's like getting off on it just fine, but like he wants to make sure that she is getting what she wants, and she like confirms that she is, and that is part of like what I think makes their relationship so sort of poignant.
Interestingly too, visually they're kind of mirrors of each other because they're both these kind of like scruffy white dudes. Right? They both have beards. They both have salt and pepper beards. They both have black hair. Which, so I think that was on purpose, right? Is to have them be similar, but Steve is much more like cleaned up and polished and refined, whereas neighbor guy is kind of scruffy and, you know, lives in this shithole apartment with her. Yeah, but ultimately shows himself to be a really good dude.
I will also say I really like that he's not in the last episode.
Really? Why?
Because even though like Molly's relationship with neighbor guy is very important and he does help her achieve her goal, that doesn't then make her relationship with him supersede her relationship with Nikki or the other parts of her life. Like, she, just because she like has had this sort of fulfilling, loving relationship with this man doesn't then mean that he is now the most important person in her life.
No, and I don't necessarily think that's the case, but Steve gets to say goodbye as her husband. And so...
No, that's also because they parted on bad terms.
Yeah. I mean, I see the reasoning for not having him there because I guess what they had to say to each other, they already said to each other. And she did tell him, I don't want you to see me die. I don't want to die with you. I want to live with you. I want to get a dog with you. So like, I get it. But in a way, I was almost like putting myself in his shoes, and I think I would be devastated if I didn't get to say. But again, it wouldn't be about me in that moment. So like, I hear what you're saying. I don't think him being there would be saying that relationship supersedes the others, because Nikki was the one who was there, and we can talk about kinds of care in a bit. You know, so this isn't like a critique of the show, but it was just something that I noticed and was kind of thinking about how he would be feeling about it.
So I think maybe part of why I feel that way is like because like it may or may not be the best choice for if we're looking at the show in isolation, but like I can't help but compare it to like A Walk to Remember or like all of these other like romantic tragedies that are tragedies because of cancer.
Right. But the focus of those was romance, and the focus here isn't romance, right?
Well, yeah, that's part of why I think it's good that they didn't go that direction.
But I think there's a difference between having Neighbor Guy be a romantic focus and having him be an important part of this final arc of her life. And I think that's more what I'm, again, like, it's not a critique, and they did what they did for a reason. But more thinking about it, I don't think for me it would have taken away from all of the other things that have been happening. Because he wasn't even in, like, her hallucinations, right? When she starts the process of dying, he doesn't appear there either. And,
that's interesting, yeah.
And because he is, I mean, because I got the sense, too, that saying I love you was something that was really fraught for her. And because she was able to get to the point in relation to her trauma to say I love you to him that time, right? It just seemed like he had a level of importance that could have warranted an appearance. But also, this is based on a true story, right? Loosely. So maybe he didn't show up in real life. So, you know, it was just something that I noticed. I'm pushing back a little bit on, like, if he was there, it would have been too romantic. And I don't think that's what it would have been. I don't think the show would have gone in that direction.
Yeah, okay. I think that's fair.
It makes me want to start talking about Nikki now, but I do want to address your interesting question of what counts as sex before we went into kinds of care.
Yeah, I think we've been putting off talking about Nikki because that's the part that I think is most likely to make both of us cry.
Yeah. I'm trying not to spiral about it right now, honestly.
Yeah, so I put on our outline here, like, what counts as sex. And I didn't put a question mark, but I maybe have a question mark there, like, in my head, because I think it is interesting here that it's not really even framed, the way it is framed in this show isn't like, I want to have sex and have an orgasm. It is, I want to have an orgasm with another person. Like, it sets the bar differently.
Yeah.
About, like, what the priority is here, which I just think is interesting. Particularly because, like, if we're thinking about, like, Molly's very legitimate physical limitations here, like, she had a rod put in her leg. The reason she found out she had cancer again is because she had pain in her hip. Like, there are a lot of ways that, like, normal sort of penetrative sex, like, just kind of seems like it's not on the table for her.
Yeah. And we don't see her having any penetrative sex throughout the course of, which sounds so clinical to say, but, like, throughout the course of the show. Which, as you're saying, is on purpose, right? Because there are safety questions, different kinds of safety questions for her.
Well, and, like, as was brought up several times, she is immunocompromised.
Yes, she is. She is. Her mother brought that up.
She needs to start using lube. Like, there are a lot of sort of physical things that are sort of, like, addressed or mentioned, at least. Like, the lube, I think they try to make comedic, or, like, that is a thing that I think, like, there's a scene where Molly, when she's with, like, a stranger or like a guy she's met on an app, I think.
Who is on SNL, if I believe.
Oh,
I forget his name, but yeah. Go on.
But, like, a much younger guy. And she's like, okay, like, I have to like, get the lube. Like, all right, just do it. Like, this is sexy. But also, it's just not.
It's so funny. I think, honestly, part of what made it so not sexy, it was like a giant Costco-sized tub of lube with, like, a pump on the top, which is, like, not usually how they sell lube. Like, you're
and also that, like, the guy was like, oh, like, that's a lot. We need that much. So, like, again, they sort of lean into the ridiculousness of it. But all that to say, I think it is interesting in the way that, like, this show is thinking about orgasms rather than sex.
Yeah, but then also sex is in the title.
Yeah.
Which, that feels really dumb to say. Like, sex is there on the tin. But I think you're right that it is thinking more expansively and curiously about sexual relationships, sexual relations, and sexual contact, right? Than just purely something like penetrative. Though she was washing butt plugs, so there is penetration that is happening. But go on.
Yeah, well, like, I think maybe what they're doing here is sort of challenging the notion that heteronormative penetrative sex is the only kind of sex that counts without saying that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, they come at it sideways a little bit.
Right. It's not quite subtext, but it's not like full on text either. It's interesting. And I know this is a conversation that you and I started having in our last night at the Telegraph Club episode. And it's one that I think we would really like to come back to, right? Is this question of like, what is sex? What counts as sex? And I'm putting quotes around that because I think it's an open conversation, but thinking both about like what that means for children's literature and kids, YA, kids lit, right? But what that also can mean in a context like this, when there's a lot of in-text exploration of sexual desire and different kinds of sexual relationships, right?
Well, and like relationships where feasibly people never touch each other at all, but like could both get off.
Yeah, and a lot of that is just a lot of that is text, right? Like, for example, we also learned that Sonia has multiple partners. That kind of throws Dr. G for a loop, but he rolls with it.
Dr. P.
Oh, Dr. P. Throws Dr. P for a loop, but he rolls with it.
G knew.
G knew. Yes, G was involved, in fact. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, but I think more so the way you're thinking about how the show is engaging in that conversation is super interesting. It almost makes me wonder, and this is not a question I think that we can answer, but it makes me wonder about the intended audience for the show, right? Who are they expecting is going to watch Dying for sex, and who are they looking to speak to through this show, right? Weirdos like you and me, sure, but like, you know, beyond that, who are they hoping would be engaging with these conversations? I wonder. And I don't have an answer, but.
So I think this actually kind of works as a transition to thinking about Molly and Nikki.
Oh dear.
Because
okay.
I feel like the primary audience for this show is largely women, and especially adult women.
Okay.
Because as much, so like, while this is a show about Molly's pleasure, this is also, I think, primarily a show about the friendship, the female friendship between Molly and Nikki, and the importance of like that sort of platonic, deep love that they have for each other, which really hit for me.
Do you want to speak on that a little bit more? As I get my life together over here.
So you kind of know from the beginning of the show that Molly and Nikki are going to be very important to each other, and that Nikki is very important to Molly, because pretty much from the get-go, we have Molly telling Nikki as she pulls up in her like beat up old car, "I'm dying. I don't want to die with Steve. I want to die with you." And there's a sort of question, I think, or not, I think a question that the show is answering of what it means to die with someone. And what that looks like, and the toll that takes, but also like, I don't know, just like how much Molly like loves and trusts Nikki, that like she wants her to be the person who was there, like not just like when she dies at the end, but like through the long process that could take up to 5 years, and doesn't end up taking that long, but could take that long, of like moving towards the end of her life. But also like something else that I think the show takes really seriously is how much of a toll the caretaking takes on Nikki.
Yeah. 100%. That was difficult to watch, in that Nikki took on this responsibility and was doing it because of how much she loves Molly, but also I think in some ways did not realize how much of a toll it would take on her to do this kind of caretaking, and how much of her own life she had to give up in order to be there for Molly. And I think that this was something I was thinking about actually a lot, and you saying that the show is a bit of a fantasy kind of highlights that, you know, at the end of it all, though she has lost her friend, and that is terrible, I'm not trying to take that away from Nikki, it all kind of snaps back for her in a way that feels like, not that it is a reward for her sacrifice, because I feel like that is looking down on the reason that she did it, but like the fact that she got her life back and it's even better than it was when she started taking care of Molly feels like part of the fantasy to me, that the universe is rewarding her for being there for someone, being there to die with someone, right? And all of the suffering that she had to go through, but then couldn't talk to Molly about it because whatever she was going through, what Molly was going through was worse, right? I don't know. I was really touched by their relationship, and maybe this, I don't know. I think the show wanted you to do this, even if it doesn't feel a little fair. But I wish Molly had a bit more acknowledgement for like what pressure she was putting on Nikki. Not in a like, I'm super grateful, I'm fawning over you kind of way, but there was a sequence when Molly was talking about her trauma with Nikki in their apartment bathroom because Nikki moved out of her boyfriend's house because they broke up. And Nikki says, it sounds like you might need to get a therapist to talk through some stuff. And Molly says, I don't need a therapist, I have you. And I was like, I hear you, girl, but also this is like, support teams are important, right? And even though Nikki is being such a big support for her, Nikki shouldn't have to take on roles like being a therapist, you know? But you were going to say something.
No, you're right. But I also think in that moment, I felt like the show was positioning us as the audience to also feel how unreasonable that expectation was that Molly had. Like the show wasn't like endorsing it.
No.
Oh no, like this is. So I'm thinking here about the overall balance of the show.
Yeah.
And I think it is important. So you're right that it kind of like Nikki does get her life back at the end in a way that is a little bit of a fantasy, but I also think it's important that like she does, like she loses her job, she breaks up with her boyfriend, that it is just like a really nice guy who was worried about her.
Yeah.
She can't get an apartment. Yeah, she but then she can't get her own apartment and is like crashing with her friend who has cancer basically because she can't get a job, so because she can't hold a job, so she can't get an apartment. It's like she doesn't have an income. Like her whole life
collapses,
becomes about taking care of Molly.
Yeah,
and then like the show I think draws our attention to the impossibility of that positioning by having like a conversation that Nikki has with her pregnant sister in the hallway when they're like,
it was Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
It was Hanukkah.
I couldn't. I was thinking Passover because of the time of year it is now.
Yeah, it was
like,
recently
that's
Passover.
the wrong one.
But yeah, no.
But like, and her sister being like, look, like you need to draw boundaries, and Nikki being like, I absolutely cannot do that. I cannot draw boundaries with my dying friend. And I think the show just kind of like spends as much time sitting in that difficulty as it can without turning the whole thing into like a true tragedy.
Yeah. It's tough because it's like, I wanted Nikki to draw boundaries, right? But also I personally have no idea how difficult it is to take care of somebody who is dying. You know.
Well, and I also like Nikki didn't draw boundaries, and also like Molly, she also hid a lot of like what she was losing from Molly.
Yeah.
So like Molly didn't even know necessarily how far her life was expanding to take over Nikki's because Nikki hid that from her. So it was like a situation in which like both people sort of like did something wrong, kind of. That's even too strong of a word, but also like I don't know how you can do anything else.
And it's funny because this is a question I don't think the show answers, actually, right? I think this is a struggle that the show asks us to think with or sit with, but then doesn't like tie a neat bow on it to be like, this is how you should deal with this kind of situation when someone you love is dying, right? It wasn't like, I don't think the show demonized Molly, and I don't think the show demonized Nikki for the decisions that they made, but also was kind of showing how complicated the situation is for everyone involved.
Well, and I think it also helped a little bit in how this landed for me overall as a cancer narrative that like Molly wasn't a saint.
No,
like,
yeah.
Having cancer didn't sanctify her. It didn't make her a perfect friend. She also had problems. She wasn't always a good friend. Sometimes she was selfish. Sometimes she made rash decisions and didn't think about how those would hurt other people.
Yeah. You mentioned the New Year's sequence when we were talking about Molly and her exploration, but I think the thing that was so heartbreaking for me about that sequence, once I realized that Molly was not going to be assaulted by this man demanding a hand job, was that Nikki was doing her best to make these holidays not as miserable as they could be for Molly. Nikki spent Hanukkah in the hallway. I'm assuming that she does not celebrate Christmas, but like she spent Christmas in the hospital eating hospital cookies. She decorates Molly's hospital room for New Year's because she expects that Molly can't leave. So she is willing to give and spend that time.
Well, Molly isn't supposed to leave.
No, Molly, well, yeah, Molly's not supposed to leave, but Molly is going to check herself out of the hospital, making terrible decisions, which is what I texted you, you know, to go give a hand job to a man in a car. Yeah, and the fact that Molly just kind of blows her off and is like, I didn't ask for this, which I thought was really fucked up because you did, actually. You did ask for this in episode 1. This is what you asked for. You know, and the fact that they are able to reconcile towards the end of that episode matters, right? You know, and there are apologies, but I think you're absolutely right that the fact that Molly isn't perfect and we do not put her on a pedestal for this show, that she is not. The show very much sits with the fact that she can be fucked up too. You know? So what do you think it means to die with someone based on what the show is putting together?
I don't know. I think it's just really hard.
I think what kind of illuminates it for me is this line that Nikki, talking with her ex-partner, who ends up at the end becoming her partner again, which is good because I wanted Noah and Nikki to get back together. But she talks about how she did not realize that she could love someone so much, and that this experience has shown her how deep her love is for Molly, and that even though she won't be there for someone coming into the world for like birth, she can be there for the end with someone. And I think the question kind of comes back to love for me, that there is kind of an acceptance sounds like too strong of a word, because she wasn't just like zen about the fact that it was happening, but like kind of like how when you have a baby, babies are going to do baby things because they're babies, and you know, you can't, a baby's going to cry. So like, I know sometimes it can be frustrating and annoying, but no one's going to be like, wow, fuck you, baby, for crying, right? I think there's maybe some of that there, that kind of love and that deep well of love that you have for somebody can extend them grace in this moment in which, you know, they can't help but be what they are, you know. And again, I don't think that means that Nikki should have let her entire life fall apart the way that she did, right? But I think for me, that's kind of what I got out of it, you know. And I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it. Oh boy.
Yeah. So I think and this is the part where I might get emotional talking about it.
Go for it.
I think the last episode was really, really well done. And how it was sort of like matter of fact in thinking about death. Shout out to the hospice nurse. Was her name Amy?
It was Amy. She was a nut. I liked her.
Oh,
though.
she was great. But like and she was very sort of like matter of fact and like, but also funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say more than matter of fact. She was excited.
Yeah.
But okay.
but in a way that helps her be matter of fact about like the process of dying with Molly in a way that sort of like cut the didacticness of it. Mm-hmm. But the reason I'm saying that, I liked how like the sense of sort of just like being there with Molly at the end with her mom, who we should talk about a little bit more, and with Nikki, but just like Nikki and Gail and Molly just kind of like being together. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't have to be active together, but they could just sort of be in the same space. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I keep thinking about when I think about dying with someone is when Amy tells Molly's mom that like sometimes people hold on for someone. Mm-hmm. I told you we were going to cry on the podcast.
Yep, you did.
I need a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Clearly I do too.
Ooh. Man, I didn't get any tissues.
I didn't either. I think I have some napkins here.
I have a microfiber cloth.
Oh, God. Be careful. Don't get like dust in your eye.
That's fine. But when Amy tells Gail that sometimes people hold on for someone and that Gail suspects, I think correctly, that Molly is hanging on because she doesn't want Nikki to be alone.
And I'm laughing because what does she do to help with that is that she calls her ex and has him drag his drums all the way to the hospital because she says that Molly wants him to perform. And she like broke into Nikki's phone to do this.
I just like really loved the line where like Molly, who at this point is like, she's only sort of halfway still connected to reality. It's like, Mom, like we talked about boundaries and how you were going to respect them. She's like, yeah, your boundaries. I don't have to respect Nikki's. So that was very funny and also extremely inappropriate of Gail to do this. But also, like, I also really wanted Nikki and Noah to get back together, especially after he, like, brought all the vibrators after her car got towed. And
Soup.
And he was just, like, such a nice guy. And, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, circling back, I guess that's what I think of when I think of dying with somebody.
Oh, man. Yeah. I don't know. Got nothing else. I just... So, I will say that I think because I am a lady, that female friendships in stories are ones that, like, really kind of get to the core of me. Mm-hmm. I was thinking a lot about the K-drama 39, which I don't think we've ever talked about, but is another one of those, the genre that I call the trio of women doing a friendship, which is one of my favorite K-drama genres. But in that show, one of their friends has a terminal cancer and, you know, spoiler for a show that's 3 years old, dies, right? And they have to kind of keep on living. And even though it's just like a quick second, and I know I talked a little bit about this when I talk about Nikki kind of getting the fantasy over the end, I do think the having to keep on living is an important part of dying with someone that I don't think the show really sits with, which is fine because it's not about Nikki, right? The show's not about her. But that kind of epilogue scene when she looks at the two old women who are having a bawdy conversation and like thinks about Molly, it really resonated. This like that when someone you love dies or when you die with someone, keeping on living is an important part of that love in a sense, you know? Yeah. And that was just something that resonated with me. So I'm going to stop here because now my brain is just like screaming and Corinne's not allowed to die, actually. You know, which is not what the podcast is about. So we were going to think a bit more about like kinds of care. And you had mentioned Sonia and this kind of like professional care that they show for Molly and for the other folks who are stage 4 cancer folks. Something that I wondered watching this and thinking about Sonia was if they showed the same level of like attention and care to everyone that was in that like terminal cancer group, or if, because of how social workers are assigned, if they were able to focus very specifically on Molly in a way. I kind of like to imagine that they took everyone on wild sexcapades, which like it's not fair, but consensually, right? And that the level of care that they showed to Molly was kind of the level of care that they showed across the board because of the kinds of patients that they were dealing with. But you had some concerns in your watch.
So I do want to start out by saying that I really liked Sonia and the actor's performance. I think that was excellent.
Yes.
I do think because pretty much every person of color in this show worked in the hospital and like largely were like not doctors. Like Dr. P was white.
Right.
But like as like nurses and sort of lower level staff at the hospital, I think it was a little bit complicated for Sonia, Black non-binary person, to serve as almost a sort of spiritual guide to Molly, in a way that like I don't think there was anything wrong with Sonia being Black, but I felt it maybe a little bit uncomfortably whenever they like would say something maybe a little bit more didactic and like, oh, and Black women have it like they take Black women's pain even less seriously, and like moments like that where I was like,
So I will ask us to be more specific because Noah is a person of color. He is East Asian. So,
oh yeah, true.
You know, so if we want to talk very specifically about like the depiction of Blackness in this, I think we can do that because Ernie was also a sassy Black man.
Ernie was very funny.
Who was the mean nurse.
Yeah.
And I did really like Ernie. But I think there is, if we're thinking specifically about Blackness and how Blackness is represented in Dying for Sex, right? Because we're in New York, right? So Black people are there. But we do only kind of see Black folks in a service working capacity, which is something that we can critique. Now, you know, just because I'm trying to thread a needle here that I don't know if I'll be able to thread succinctly, but like people have jobs, people work. So, you know, this isn't like they are shown to be butlers or like maids or whatever, right? This is in the context of a show that is thinking a lot about medicine, right? And Sonia is a social worker, so there is a level of expectation of the kinds of ways that they're going to be communicating with Molly, but that also doesn't mean then that like only seeing Black people in these specific roles is not something that's worth thinking about, right? That's true, because I will say Puppy also I think was a person of color, you know, so there were other people of color throughout the story, but if we're thinking very specifically about Blackness, I think that's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, I think I'm more specifically thinking about Blackness in this instance because there were like maybe, and I'm not even sure how I feel about making this critique, but like there were shades a little bit of like the mammy who takes care of you, or like the magical Negro figure who is a spiritual guide that like I think could have been abetted somewhat by having like another Black character who was like one of Molly's friends.
Well, you know what? The therapist, who is also kind of in another servy kind of role. At least the therapist was a doctor though. But yeah, okay. No, I hear what you're saying. I don't think it's a bad thing to bring up. I think we can like Sonia as a character and also recognize that there might be some cultural baggage that we bring to the role.
Yeah.
I do think there is also, again, because this is partially based on a true story, I think is what the text afterwards says. It's kind of like, again, I don't know where they took liberties, right? I don't know if Molly actually had a Black non-binary person that was their social worker, right? That might be what just happened. But if it is a artistic decision, then I think you're right that there is something to think about there, something to be considered.
I mean, that said, overall, I did really like, or appreciate, I guess I should say, the role that the various sort of like healthcare and care workers played in Molly's life, like her relationship with Sonia, her relationship with Dr. P, her relationship even briefly with Amy at the end. They all, I think, played important roles, not just of sort of like practical medical care, but like of emotional care in Molly's journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that balance of kind of practical physical care and emotional care was super important, in which kind of Molly had to get Dr. P on board with as the story was going on. So much so that he actually needed a moment at the end when, you know, they were going to talk about end of life options because of how attached he became to Molly as well, you know?
Well, and like I think it's not the point of the show that it's hard for doctors who treat cancer, but I think the show is also aware that like it is hard for doctors who treat terminal cancer. And part of that difficulty like might be part of why he was so brusque
and keep the distance.
Yeah,
it's not easy work. Actually, because I like to shout out my friends for things. One of my dear friends' wife is I forget the exact term for what she does, but she's an anesthesiologist, but she works specifically in like palliative care for children. And she recently did an interview with her alumni magazine because she got her MFA at the same time that she worked on her medical degree at Iowa. And she talked a bit about how she uses writing as a way to kind of create a bit of closure with working in the space that she works in. So I'll link that in the show notes because she's amazing. And I love her and look up to her at the same time. So I'll drop that in the show notes as well. But kind of like what you're saying, that it's not easy for the doctors as well. And the way that kind of like, I don't know, storytelling and connection can be an important part of like that process as well. Yeah. Thinking about doctors aside and kind of pulling in thoughts of like Molly's care team, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk a bit about Gail, Molly's mother. So I'm thinking maybe we can point to Gail as kind of a way to round out our conversation.
Yeah, so I really appreciated Gail's role here, and that like, so Gail carries a lot of guilt for Molly being assaulted by one of Gail's boyfriends when Molly was a kid, which also like is a problem because Gail is also like a recovering addict and like perhaps like does have some culpability, but also like was drugged by the man. So like it's a very complex situation where a lot of people might feel guilty, but really just the man is at fault.
Right. Yeah. But fuck that guy.
Worse
than
guy.
Steve.
Oh, far worse than Steve. At least Steve brought health insurance to the table.
Right. Shoot.
But I sort of appreciated that Molly and Gail's relationship stayed kind of messy.
Yeah.
And that like it didn't just get better because like Molly was dying.
It wasn't just fixed.
And that Molly did need to hold Gail at a distance for her own sort of mental well-being. But that also when... So another moment that really got me in the show is that when Molly found out she was going to hospice and called her mom to be like, hey... that her mom was like in the lobby of the hospital.
Yep.
After Molly had sent her away, what might have, I think, been months earlier. And there's this sort of implication that she's just been waiting nearby in case Molly needs her. And like when Molly's like, wait, you're like in the lobby of like this hospital?
The right hospital?
Like, right now? Why? And her mom being like, oh, like where else would I be? Like that moment really hit for me as well.
Yeah, but also that Molly called her up right away, knowing that she was down there. Yeah, Gail is really complicated. And one of the moments that it felt really poignant to me is when they have kind of the blow up, because not only did Gail tell a variety of people in their family that Molly had cancer.
Oh boy.
The scene I'm going to bring up was like so cringeworthy, but has her cousin come and start like a food train,
a meal train,
which I will say, when and I guess I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show before, but like real life sadness and coming when my mother passed away, it was really helpful that people made us a lot of fucking food because we didn't have to think about it. And our freezer was stocked with food for a really long time. So not that meal trades themselves is a bad thing, but it was the way that Molly's mother disrespected her boundaries, told all these people about it, and then made a meal train about food that Molly couldn't even eat. It was like what it was like a Mexican dish, but I can't remember what it was. It was chilaquiles, yes.
I love chilaquiles.
So Corinne would have been very happy with this dish, but Molly couldn't eat it. So her cousin comes to like this hospital space that she's in. I think was this after Molly had the rod put in her leg?
I think it was episode 6, so it might have been after the rod. Okay, so she maybe had the cane, but she was getting chemo.
Okay, it was
she was like mid chemo session.
Right. Because Nikki had her tooth taken out and couldn't be there, and that's why her mom was there. It was a chemo session. So Nikki's cousin comes with the chilaquiles, and Molly's like, "What the fuck? I can't eat that." And then Gail also told Steve
comes with his fucking new girlfriend
and brings her there, which I thought was the worst. Like, what?
To the chemo appointment. Like,
so
boundaries.
Boundaries, right. And that in a way kind of establishes the way that Gail kind of pushes past Molly's boundaries. And then that's when we have the whole sequence where she walks in when Molly is peeing on Puppy, right? And again, inserting herself into the apartment, coming into the bathroom, violating the boundaries. And then when she and Molly have kind of this back and forth where her mother is like, "Oh, is this all because of the trauma that happened?" Which I think is, I'm going to put a pin in that, and kind of insists that Molly needs to say that she forgives her, even though Molly has had this conversation with her before, right? In a way, trying to make the situation about herself. Gail is trying to make the situation about herself. Molly draws a line and says, "You need to forgive yourself," or she just says, "Forgive yourself," right? Which I think Gail really takes to heart, and it doesn't fix their relationship, as you're saying, right? But it kind of puts Gail in her place in a way that I think Molly needed to do,
and make space for Gail to be there at the end.
Yeah. Really quickly, though, we don't have to stay on this for a long time, but Molly repeatedly throughout the show tries to separate what she is doing from the trauma that she experienced, which, based on what we were shown, I think she was right to do. She didn't deal with her trauma, right? She should absolutely have dealt with that perhaps in a more healthy way. But a lot of people were trying to tie her sexual exploration and her desire to have sex back to the trauma that she had. And the show makes it, I think, very clear that those are not the same thing. And Gail tries to do that in this moment, saying like, "Are you doing all of these things? Are you peeing on this man because of what happened to you?" And Molly really pushes back on that, which I think is really important. Kind of like you were saying beforehand, that the cancer isn't the only thing that happens to her. This kind of conversation about the fact that she can have sexual needs and desires, and she can have kind of kinky desires, and just because she wants to be kinky does not mean that that is informed by a kind of trauma. And I think that's a really important statement that the show is making, that even though this happened to her and that she does need to work through it, right, because it is impeding her ability to have fulfilling relationships, right? Because she also sees her abuser when neighbor guy tells her that he loves her for the first time, right? So even though there's kind of that blockage there, that wanting to explore these things is not a trauma response necessarily. Yeah. And I appreciated that kind of like hammering that home in the conversation with Gail. But she was interesting. I think she was a good addition to the show.
Yes, I agree.
Outside of like, if this is real Molly's real relationship with her real mother, because that's a whole other can of worms. But as far as the show is concerned, I think Gail worked really well as a character. Woo. So, Dying for Sex. Did we convince you to watch it if you made it all the way through this episode? Oh, man. But I do really hope that people are watching the show, and I would love to hear what you, our listeners, think about it. So, if you have thoughts about Dying for Sex, you can find us on Instagram, on Blue Sky, and on Tumblr. And, share your deep feelings, whether you really liked it, what you thought about the tightrope balancing between comedy and tragedy. If you were really hot for Neighbor Guy also, you know.
If you would also cry if you talked about it on a podcast.
Yeah, give us your thoughts. Let us know. Shed a few tears with us, if you will. But yeah, is there anything else that we wanted to... I don't know. I'm a little emotionally drained, honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't believe you watched the last episode today. Like, I was, like, sad about it for, like, a few days after I watched it.
I think our conversation is going to be kind of cathartic for me, because what I needed to get my head out, something that I do when I watch shows, especially sad ones, is, like, I start to put myself in the position of characters, and... this is a show I don't want to do that with for too long. So I think sitting here with you and talking about it will be my way of kind of processing my emotions about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's something that I think was maybe a little bit too easy to do, was think when I was watching it, I was saying, well, who, if this was it, who would it be for me?
Stop. No. No.
All right.
That'll make us just start crying right here, right now. We already did that once. It's embarrassing enough. No, I'm kidding. But thank you all so much for being here, for listening to Corinne and I cry over the course of this
and then
episode.
Ayani make buzzer noises at the end.
Yeah, well, because you were about to open up the tear ducts again, and, you know.
All right. Well, on that note, then.
This has been Sex, Love, Literature. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.